Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with a video ranking all 10 episodes from the first season of House of the Dragon, and I'm joined by my friend Greg again for this one.
How's it going?
So we did almost every episode reviews for the first season here of House of the Dragon. Both really enjoyed it, obviously, and Greg has read the Fire and Blood and the material that's being adapted here. I have not, so it was kind of a unique kind of perspective, I think, at going at this one from kind of two different sides there. And yeah, so we thought we'd do this video, putting together our kind of list of the 10 episodes here, ranked from well, worst to best, but I don't think either of us have an episode that we would consider bad.
Yeah,
From
more
this
like
season.
least favorite.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or like least best, least favorite. So, yeah. And of course, it's all subjective. So we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What would your ranking be for some of these, or at least just kind of what's your favorite, maybe least favorite episode, that kind of thing. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel as well. I would really appreciate that. So, yeah, so we're going to do a bit of a different system for this one. We're going to go episode by episode, so we can kind of both share our thoughts at the same time on each one, even though we may have it at different spots. So we'll kind of go through episode 1 to 10, and then just say which one it is for us. And that's kind of the way we'll go for this one. Alright, so let's start off with the first episode then, The Heirs of the Dragon, which is basically our kind of de facto pilot, right? HBO ordered this to series, so it's not called pilot, but it is the premiere here. So, Greg, where'd you have this one on your list?
Yeah, I had one at 9.
Okay, and I had it at number 8, so close.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like the episode a lot, and I think it does set up the show well. But I think just the nature of a pilot is that it's not building on a story; it's kind of just introducing it. So I think it's difficult from a character perspective to really put it above the succeeding episodes. Where we really see these characters go through the ebbs and flows of their kind of first half arc. I think it's just hard to grade it on the same scale, kind of in my opinion. But yeah, obviously there's that really kind of visceral birth scene,
Right.
intercut with the tourney. That's kind of one of the big kind of cinematic, I guess, highlights of the episode. But yeah, I mean, really, really good performances to kick off the show. Yeah, I mean, I really don't have anything to quibble about the episode, like anything to really any negatives. I just think it's like I said, like a function of it being the first episode and not having to do a lot of setup, obviously, which is at times a bit exposition heavy. Not even exposition heavy, but just
It's
setting
a
up a
lot.
lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's still a good episode. But yeah, I mean, to me, I'd almost grade it on the scale of the two pilots. And this pilot I thought was better,
Okay. Yep.
or
Yep.
than episode 6, than kind of the repilot. So
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think I said in our review at the time, I thought it was a great introductory episode. And I think as we kept going in the season, my kind of, the spot on the ranking for this episode, I guess, went down, or kind of my thoughts on it went down. Like you said, just as we got to know these characters more. And I also, at the end of this first episode, it almost does feel kind of like a separate episode to me, because there really was no, driving event that was going to happen right after this episode. It really did it felt really like a pilot, like something that was complete, that, okay, let's now, get together and figure out what we're going to do for the rest of the
right,
season.
yeah,
Now that we just put together this episode. So,
yeah, I think in that sense it is kind of insulated. It's kind of self-contained.
right, exactly. So, and yeah, a really good introduction. I like the prologue as well at the very beginning, with Jaehaerys, seeing that, and yeah. But just like you
What?
said, it's hard to
Yeah,
compare with these other episodes in the time since.
yeah.
Right.
Just to quick, finish up on that episode. One thing that I kind of found weirder in retrospect is that Emma Darcy, who plays old Rhaenyra, is narrating the beginning.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like Yeah, she narrates the Great Council scene with
Oh, okay.
King Jaehaerys and Viserys being chosen by the great lords of Westeros, which
Right.
I just found kind of strange considering that in that kind of part of the show, Millie Alcock was the main Rhaenyra, and then they
Right.
never bring any other narration up in the rest of the show, so it's not
Hmm.
like it's not like there's kind of a consistent narration by Darcy. So I just found that kind of weird, but it's more of a nitpick than anything.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because I mean, at the time, I wasn't familiar with Emma Darcy before this, so at the time I wouldn't have known the voice either.
Yeah.
So that yeah, that's an interesting one. All right,
Mhm.
so that's episode one then. So pretty low on our list, but for the reasons we said. Okay, so episode two then, which is the Rogue Prince. This one I had at number four. I had this one pretty high on my list. What was it on yours?
I have it at 7.
Okay. Okay, so not too far off.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and even I think for this, I think pretty much for me, I think looking at my list, I would say that probably between 5 and 7, it's all pretty close.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's pretty interchangeable. I think with even up to 4 or 5 for me.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean, obviously the scene with probably the standout scene is obviously at Dragonstone
Mm-hmm.
on the kind of the bridge on Dragonstone where obviously we have Damon and facing off with Otto. This episode, Damon just kind of goes rogue after episode 1, takes Dragonstone and pronounces himself Prince of Dragonstone in the air.
Right.
And so that was a great scene. And then basically the rest of the episode, more or less, is various characters: Corlys Velaryon, Otto, Grandmaster Melos, Lionel Strong, all basically giving their case for the fact that Viserys should remarry, and then whom he should marry. So yeah, kind of I said this at the time, but a pretty kind of classic Thrones bridge episode where there's a lot of scheming and a lot of scenes in rooms with people talking, and I really enjoyed it. But I think it would be probably tough to put on the same level as my top 3 or 4, but still a really good episode.
Yeah, and I think I really agree with what you said there about the politicking and that kind of thing, the scenes between these characters, a lot of just kind of talking and kind of gaming things. And I thought, one of the scenes that really stuck out to me was the one with Rhaenys and Rhaenyra in this episode. And of course that kind of plays a large role in things as the season goes on here, especially Rhaenys plays a big part in the end of season 1 here. And kind of that whole dynamic of having a woman on the throne and what that means to Rhaenys, who was that was taken away from her, and then Rhaenyra kind of being the heir and inheriting the throne in kind of a similar way there, or at least being the one that people think are going to be on the throne. So yeah, I really like this episode. Also, really great episode developing Daemon as well early on, the whole heir for a day kind of thing that went on. And it, obviously the Rogue Prince, the title fits. Really, really great stuff. And then the ending to this episode too, I thought was really great with kind of the reveal that Viserys has chosen Alicent as his wife, and of course the kind of fallout that happens between Rhaenyra and her, which of course is like a fundamental thing now in the show as we go forward. So yeah, really like this episode 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just as like one kind of final word, and I think it probably has more to do with the structure of the entire season. But I think I would have liked one more episode with Rhaenyra and Alicent. At the end of
Mm-hmm.
episode 3, maybe then that's when Viserys decides to wed Alicent at the end of episode 3, or at some point episode 3, um, rather than in episode 2. But that's again more kind of a pacing of the entire season than really a fault with one episode.
Right. Yeah. Yep. That's understandable. All right. So episode 3 then is Second of His Name, and I think this is pretty high on both of our lists. For me, it's number 3. What is it up for you?
3.
Oh, okay. Perfect. So we align on this one. Yeah, this is just another great episode. Again, I thought the Royal Hunt was I did really enjoy that, I think, but I did like the Stepstones part a little bit better. Especially that ending sequence, but like a 10-minute, maybe 12-minute sequence there at the end of the episode, which is like really the only battle sequence that we get throughout this entire first season, or at least definitely the most significant one. With Damon and Corliss comes in with the axe, and of course Damon takes out the crab feeder. We see a lot of Caraxes in this one, kind of coming down and trying to burn the whole kind of cavern there. And then we see the Triarchy soldiers hiding in the caves. Yeah, I thought this was really great. And yeah, and of course the Royal Hunt stuff was really good. Really like the Lannisters, right, introduction to them, and that kind of coming into the picture with the one Jason Lannister trying to court Rhaenyra as well. So yeah, definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. But for me, I think the Royal Hunt probably was the my favorite part. Really the relationship dynamic between Rhaenyra and Viserys. Kind of this relationship eroding in a sense, and I think just a lot of great conversations between them. And then obviously Rhaenyra and Kristen Cole. I think a lot of the kind of the imagery and whatnot with the white stag and everything like that, and I thought it was really good. And yeah, I think it's definitely my favorite episode from the first five. And honestly, I think I could probably make a case for it for being two, probably not one, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean everything you said. It's a really really stunning episode.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was definitely one of my favorites, for sure. I guess my second favorite of the first five here, which we'll get to right now. So, episode 4, King of the Narrow Sea. To me, this was my number one from season 1. And what was it at for you?
Uh, this episode 4,
Yep.
8.
Oh wow. Okay. So quite a bit of a difference here. Yeah, I guess I'll let you go first. Why is it a number 8
Well,
for you?
I was gonna say, why don't you go first because it's your number
Oh,
one.
okay.
I would think you have probably more to talk about.
Okay, fair. Okay, so I really love the dynamic here between Damon and Rhaenyra. I thought the directing in this episode too, I thought was maybe the best with Claire Kilner. I thought she handled it so well in this kind of tension, kind of building up within Rhaenyra and Damon, and then that, of course, that big scene in the brothel was just so shocking to me. And because obviously I didn't know what was about to happen. I had no idea that they were really gonna like actually possibly hook up and do this. And I just love the dynamic too, where Damon starts off in this episode as being kind of close to Viserys again, kind of jovial, and then at the end, Viserys kicks him on the floor of the hall, and he's completely disgraced. Viserys says he never wants to see him again. So just the kind of rise and fall of Daemon in this episode I thought was great. And like I said, then the dynamic with Rhaenyra, and then of course you want to talk about Rhaenyra and Kristen Cole. There'll be kind of a steamy kind of thing there, and Rhaenyra kind of finally getting that autonomy as well. And then the one last thing was the dynamic, the parallel between Alicent and Rhaenyra. I thought was so well done in this episode, really kind of setting up where Rhaenyra's path was and where Alicent's path was, and that really kind of plays into the rest of the season here.
I think probably for me, I don't really have any negatives that come to mind exactly. Probably for me, it didn't stand out as much as episodes I've had ahead of it. Because I mean, I agree with everything you're saying about this. Very much a Rhaenyra Daemon episode. Obviously, at the beginning we get the scene where Daemon walks through the throne room,
Right.
just very very tense. Kind of looks like Daemon is going to challenge his brother, and then lays his crown down. Puts his sword down, and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to disagree with on that. For me, it was could be partially a bit of recency bias, with some newer episodes that I have ahead of it. But yeah, I mean, it's still a very good episode for me. Again, probably interchangeable. Could make its way a few spots up. Just other episodes just stood out a little bit more throughout the season.
And do you think maybe because you've read the material and you knew kind of where it was going, do you think that maybe as well kind of impacted your kind of how you felt about the whole Damon and Rhaenyra dynamic in this episode, or?
Yeah, no, that definitely could be it. I mean, I knew they were going to get
Okay.
together at some point. Well, I knew exactly, basically, more or less what point. Um,
Right.
I knew they were going to marry, so I didn't know exactly when they would introduce kind of a real intimate moment. Even though there's obviously been a lot of flirtation and a lot of kind of sexual tension throughout other episodes.
Right.
Um, I kind of saw where it was going as they entered the brothel. So yeah, that definitely could be part of it.
Right. Okay. All right. So episode 5, then, We Light the Way. Essentially the mid-season finale, really. And so I had this one at number 7.
I've got it at 5.
Okay. Okay. So pretty close. Pretty close.
Yeah, no, again, around this area, mine are somewhat interchangeable. I think, yeah, this one, I think it opens with Damon killing his lady wife in the
Yes.
Vale.
Yes, I believe. Yeah.
Um, so that's a very kind of jarring way to open up the episode, and then basically the whole episode is the wedding between um, Rhaenyra and Laenor. I mean, the beginning we get basically the betrothal when Viserys visits Driftmark, but then basically the rest of the episode is the wedding. And then this, yeah, like you said, the mid-season finale for the kind of first half. Yeah, I mean, Kristen Cole is in shambles. Definitely his lowest point probably in this well, probably the show. I mean, I guess this episode very much transforms him, I think, into
Right.
the much more villainous character that he becomes in the second half of the season. Kind of shows the origins of his allegiance or switching allegiance from Rhaenyra to Alicent. And I mean, obviously, I think somewhat controversial him killing Joffrey, like controversial as in people viewing it not like in the context of the show, but like
Right.
some people were not a fan of that. I think that probably could have been handled a little bit differently. It was I don't know if I said so during the review for this episode, but yeah, I mean, it is a bit of pretty far fetched. I mean that yes, he's a Kingsguard, but he could really just murder someone in cold blood in the middle of a wedding.
Right.
Some people said, well, he's trying to get killed. He's trying to do this and that. It's not so much his motivation that would provoke some questions for me. It's more that there's really no repercussions, even in the moment, which I found kind of weird. But, aside from that, I really enjoyed, the grandeur of the wedding. I think it's visually a very well done episode, costumes, hair, everything like that. And then obviously the Alicent entrance, very cool. And the Damon entrance as well, and just his general disposition in the episode's very funny. So yeah, I have it right smack dab in the middle of my episodes here. But again, I could probably move it up 1 or 2 spots even. But I think it's pretty good around the kind of the halfway point of my rankings here.
Right. Yeah, and I think just my overall thoughts, and I said this in our review too, I thought this was a good episode, but just as a mid-season finale, that's kind of where my criticisms would lie. I thought a couple things really could have been fleshed out a little bit more, especially at the end. The turn of Kristen Cole, I thought was okay in the way it played out in the wedding and that, but the way that kind of Alicent finds him in that last scene, and to me it felt like almost like that scene was just cut off before it began. I really would have liked to see how Kristen and Alicent develop this kind of relationship, whereas we don't really get to see that. It's kind of just in between the time skip, and I felt like maybe you could have touched on that a little bit more in this episode. Although maybe you're right, maybe they need another episode in here again to kind of cover all that stuff, but that's kind of the nature of the beast when you're doing when they did all these time skips. But yeah, the entrances were great. Love the scenes there with Graham McTavish doing the kind of vocal entrances of everybody at the wedding.
Yeah.
That was
Yep.
really cool. And all the kind of banners and all that stuff. So, yeah, but overall, a good episode, but just as a mid-season finale, that'd be the only reason that this one kind of finds it towards the bottom of my list. All right, so next we have episode 6, titled The Princess and the Queen. I had this one at number 9.
I had it at 10.
Okay, so pretty close at the bottom of both of our lists. To me, this of course this is kind of our like we've said our repilot in a way, or kind of the start of the second half after the big time jump. And I thought it was a good episode. I think it took a little bit for me at least to kind of get used to these new versions of the characters, right? With having Olivia Cook, Emma Darcy come in, and then of course we had the actors for the kids as well come in, who were only there for about 2 episodes, but we still had them as well. And yeah, it just kind of took a little bit of time getting used to everything, I think. And to me, just not a lot of stuff actually happened in this episode, where it's not necessarily a big issue. But in this one, I just felt, it was just kind of getting us back into things, and almost as like an introduction again to this world. And I did really like the ending to the episode there, where Laris kind of turns on his brother and dad here, killing Harwin and Lionel. And we see kind of that dynamic start with Alicent and him. Of course, and we see kind of the fruits of that relationship even after this episode. So yeah, I really like the ending of it, but definitely doesn't stand out as much as some of these other ones.
I think that the way I kind of graded the pilot and this episode, I kind of basically just graded them in on kind of on a list of two ranking on a ranking of two. So I basically had which pilot did I like better, and I picked the first one. But yeah, I think there are some kind of issues and with this episode, specifically, I think with Harwin and Lena, and I think more so Harwin for me. It's just we get basically one scene with Harwin and Rhaenyra when Joffrey's born,
Right.
and I think the implication of this scene to me is that this was like a very passionate love affair. I think that's fair to extrapolate from this little scene. And I just don't really see why they did that, considering they killed him off immediately, and then in the succeeding episodes, she has no reaction to it. Or so to me, that's kind of weird. I think it's fine to kill him off right away, and it's fine to set up a relationship between him and his sons, because the sons, Jace and Luke, talk about it later. Right. They talk about it in the next episode, and I'm sure they'll reference it at other points, because I think they're pretty fully aware that he was their father. But it just felt weird that they tried to set that up with Rhaenyra and then never acknowledge it with her again. Another thing, the Lena death, another very quick death in terms of bringing a character in and then immediately killing them off. I think that's fine, for me with Lena, because in this episode they set Daemon and Lena up as basically just a marriage of convenience, I suppose. Clearly these two people are attracted to each other, as we saw in the last episode and at the wedding. There is attraction there, but there's not any kind of passionate love. They've just really been a good partnership, two dragon riders, two very kind of astute, members of this society. And so that didn't bother me as much as the Harwin one, but still feels a bit jarring to meet a character and then immediately they're killed off, especially when Harwin gets a decent amount of screen time. I mean, they both do, really. They have a few scenes each. So that felt a bit jarring, but yeah, everything else you said I think is correct, and I don't think it's a bad episode, but
yeah,
I think it definitely is the weaker kind of pilot, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you do make a good point about some of that stuff, the Lena stuff as well. I think and that's the thing, like I don't think it was a problem in itself, but maybe they could have just done it a little bit better. I think that's what I felt too, and just the kind of rushing a little bit of things in this episode. For sure. And again, though, they had a lot of stuff to cover too, right? Like after this time jump, we got to come back into things, and then they got to set up things for the rest of the season, really. Which is like episode 8, 9, and 10, setting things up after the next kind of big-ish kind of time skip, or a little bit significant time jump there again. All right, so next we have episode 7, titled Driftmark, and I think this will be probably our biggest gap of any of these episodes. For me, I had this at number 10 as my least favorite, and you had it at what spot?
I had it at 4.
4. Okay, so you had the highest. You wanna start?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the highlights of this episode for me, Lena's funeral. That was great. Just just these glances between these different characters, I thought was great, and it was just a very for a scene that had more or less not very much dialogue. I just thought it was very very enthralling. And in those scenes, I think the acting is very much at its peak because there's no dialogue and it's very much just based on looks and body language. And then, I mean, to me, there's a lot of highlights in this episode because then you have Rhaenyra and Daemon getting together as well later on, kind of as they're walking down by the ocean, which I thought was really well done in kind of an interesting parallel. Not parallel so much as a juxtaposition, really, to episode earlier in the show when they are in the brothel together and it's very chaotic and just a lot is going on very quickly and it feels very strange because of the age gap. But now the age gap is the same, but Rhaenyra is a lot older, so I think things are, it's a lot more of a legitimate kind of passionate affair of these two characters getting together. Obviously, maybe perhaps a bit rushed, given the fact that their respective partners died. Not so much for me from Damon's perspective, but just for Rhaenyra because they in that one scene it really made it. Obviously, just said this, but it really does make it look like Harwin was. I mean, they had 3 kids together. Clearly, they had a pretty passionate relationship, at least to some degree. Anyway, so a little bit rushed, but still a great scene. You have Aemon claiming Vhagar, which is awesome. And then, of course, you have the scene, the dagger scene, where Alicent charges Rhaenyra after Viserys doesn't take any real action on Luke having knifed out Aemon's eye earlier. Just a great scene, chaotic but really well acted, and excuse me, just a very in the same way that the funeral scene was much more kind of calm, in kind of a very calm and little dialogue, but it was enthralling. This one was very enthralling, and there's a lot more dialogue, and tensions were incredibly high. Convey the same emotion, or rather convey the same feelings between these different characters, but with just a different level of emotion. So that's a great way to kind of bookend the episode. Yeah, and obviously you'll say this, about the color grading and everything. Not great, but to me, it didn't really necessarily take away from the episode as perhaps as much as it did for you.
Yeah. So that's where I would start with this one. Shooting obviously day for night or night for day, whichever. So obviously they filmed and I think you mentioned this too. Like the one of the first photos that we actually got from the scene, or sorry, for the season, was Rhaenyra and Daemon together on the beach. And that photo was clearly in the daytime, very light outside. So, it was obvious that, and of course that's the scene in this episode. So it was obvious that they shot in the day. And clearly, I think this is, we've seen this before in Game of Thrones. They've done this, I'm sure, tons of times. But I can't remember. I can't, pinpoint a time where they did it. In that one, which is a good thing. I think in this one, you definitely can pinpoint it, especially in the funeral scenes and the scenes, with Rhaenyra and Daemon on the beach. It was only probably about 20 minutes or maybe, half the episode or a little bit less than half. In total runtime, so it wasn't a huge deal, but to me it was just kind of a little disappointing. Miguel Sapochnik is directing this episode. He's supposed to be kind of the co-showrunner, really. Supposed to be the highest director. And maybe this was out of his control too. Whatever. So anyways, besides that, I also thought the Rhaenyra and Daemon thing was just a little too rushed for me. For something that they set up so much in the first half, to have it just kind of this, basically a 5 to 10 minute sequence of them on the beach. They have this quick conversation, and then all of a sudden, they're together, and then the rest of the episode just goes really fast with them. Then towards the end of the episode, killing Laenor, but not really, of course, but killing him and getting him out of the picture so they can be married. just thought things went a little too fast. Although I really did love the Aemon claiming Vagar scene. I thought that was really great. Again, a little dark, hard to see, but still a really good kind of sequence there. But yeah, so just those kind of things. I was really disappointed. I think with the Rhaenyra and Daemon thing, especially because of how much of a role that plays in the next few episodes. It's just hard to feel that kind of relationship and not actually finally happening at that point later in the season. So that's why it's at number 10. But like we said at the beginning, I don't think it's a bad episode by any means. Still a lot of good parts to it as well. All right, so then episode 8, titled "The Lord of the Tides." This one I had at number 2.
I had it at 1.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. So both pretty high. So yeah, I guess I'll start if we have it really close to each other there. So
Sure.
um, yeah, I really like this episode a lot. Of course, this one's Vaymond trying to, well, basically it's the whole thing of trying to find an heir to Driftmark, because they think that Corlys is in really bad condition, and might be soon dying. So it's kind of this Vaymond and almost the Greens really against Rhaenyra and Lucerys then, who are trying to go in. Or trying to have Lucerys then become the heir, and so we see this kind of dynamic starting there between the Greens and Rhaenyra and that whole thing, and then of course this is Viserys's last episode. Thought that the scenes with all of them together, especially that dinner scene at the end of the episode, was just so. It was just so great to see all those characters together in one room, and that was one of my favorite moments of the season for sure. In that episode there, and then obviously getting introduced to Aemond, which I really like. Ewan Mitchell, I think, is doing an amazing job. The look that they have for Aemond too, with the eye patch and everything, just really great. So that was really good to kind of see the introduction of him in there. But yeah, anything else that I didn't mention?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. Yeah, I really like all the aged up versions of each of the different kids. Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I have this as number 1 and not, and not, I don't want to say what episode it is, but, uh, one of the other episodes is number 1. This one just, part of the reason it stands out for me is because I think Viserys, I think is one of the main characters. I think it's fair enough to say. It's fair to say. And this is his ending, and it's a great ending. He stands up for Rhaenyra, walking through the throne room, probably the best scene of the whole show, or the whole season, in my opinion. And stands up for Rhaenyra, just musters up every ounce of strength to do this. Then in his final moments, he sees his family that look very happy together and looking like they've mended some fences. And then he dies, and it's just such a beautiful ending for the character. And Petty Constantine is just has a amazing performance, certainly Emmy worthy. And yeah, I think that's probably what puts it at number 1 for me. I think it just really sticks out. Like it has some scenes that are just breathtaking, and this is kind of the last we see any sort of semblance of an amicable relationship between these kind of two factions.
Right.
Yeah. Really, probably for the rest of the show. So, well, yeah, no spoilers, but presumably for the next little while. And so, yeah, that's what puts it at number 1 for me. I just think it's outstanding.
All right, so then next we have these last 2 episodes. Episode 9, titled "The Green Council." This one I had at number 6.
Yep, I did as well.
Okay, yeah, so we both had this one. Yeah, do you want to go first for Green Council?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you compare this episode to episode 10, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily as strong. And I think that is fair to do. I mean, it's basically, an episode entirely with the Greens, Rhaenys notwithstanding, but basically the entire Green faction and none of the Blacks. And, I think it's great. I mean, we have the kind of search for Aegon, which is cool. And we get the kind of back and forth between the Cargill twins, which is, as a side note, I honestly do find it weird that they just kept those names, the Eric and Arik and Eric. I understand it works on the page, but when it comes out as a show, it's just kind of strange. Whatever. They're that's a fairly big part of the episode. They're back and forth about Aegon, about how he's basically a degenerate, and Eric knows this because he's his sworn sword. So we have the search for him. This mad dash. Alicent versus Otto. Both want Aegon on the throne. However, they would like to deal with the Blacks and Rhaenyra differently, and so that's kind of the battle is who can get to Aegon first and tell him what to do. Alicent incidentally does with Aemond and Kristen Cole. Well, they don't get to him first technically, but they get to him last.
Right. Yeah.
They end up tracking him down after the twins, but Aegon kind of escapes their hold, and then are then subsequently taken by Kristen and Aemond. And then we get the crowning scene, which was great. Just I love the costume they have here for Aegon. Thought it was really great. He's wearing Aegon the Conqueror's crown, which is obviously a new crown for the show. It's not Viserys's. Just thought that scene was fantastic. And I think just a really good, probably the best episode of the season for Aegon. And obviously for the first half of the show, he was a baby. But I think this really was because it really shows he's really seeking love from his parents. Doesn't really get it. But now he's found kind of a new vessel for love through, the common people, his subjects.
Right.
I thought it was excellent. It's, and like I said, it's 6 for me, so probably interchangeable, 1 or 2 spots up even. But I just thought it was really well done, and I think sets up some interesting arcs for the Blacks, or sorry, rather for the Greens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with a lot of what you said. I really did like that ending sequence with the crowning. Thought that was one of the best sequences of the season as well. And especially, I think you made a great point. I love that moment. We didn't talk about this episode in a review, so I don't think we talked about this, but that moment where Aegon is then, he's kind of really hesitant the whole episode. He doesn't want to be king. He doesn't want to do this, but it's almost in that moment where he kind of like raises his sword a bunch of times and kind of takes it in, that the crowd kind of appreciation, and it almost, maybe he does want this, or, maybe he's going to warm up to this. So, I did really, really like that whole sequence. And of course, Rhaenys coming in at the end, which I thought was just a great scene, of course, and kind of that tension building too. Everything just seemed so perfect that something needed to happen there, and I thought that was really, really well done. And I think the pacing to this, once they found Aegon in this episode, was just like things were just really rolling. Whereas I think in episode 10, I think it's actually a bit of a slower paced episode. Not that I guess that's necessarily good or bad, but just something I definitely noticed. It's a very fast paced kind of thing of, okay, we have Aegon, we got to get him crowned as fast as possible. It's kind of this race against time. Overall, of course, as you're about to see, I did think episode 10 was better. I really do like this decision to keep these episodes separate and not show any of Rhaenyra or Daemon in this episode 9. I really did like that choice.
Yeah.
Yep. So, okay. So last one, episode 10, the finale, The Black Queen. So this one I had just above it. I had at number 5 for me, and what was it for you?
2.
Okay, number 2. So do you want to go first for this one?
Sure. I think, like I said, for the last episode, this is very much the Blacks only episode. Again, with the exception of Aemond at the end, but yeah, it's setting up. Rhaenys comes on Meleys, her dragon, and alerts Rhaenyra and Daemon and everyone else there that they have crowned Aegon, and now he basically sits the Iron Throne. They've done this coup d'état for the Iron Throne and for the crown, and it's been successful. And Rhaenyra is beside herself. She it essentially induces her labor, and so we get this very
Right.
gruesome, visceral birth scene that ends up in a stillborn child for Rhaenyra and Daemon, which is just very incredibly emotional episode for Rhaenyra, and obviously at the end, especially she essentially loses two children in
Right.
this episode.
Right.
But yeah, everything, the crowning of Rhaenyra was very nice. I think when you juxtapose it to Aegon's is very rushed, and it's in front of the common folk, which I guess in some ways it perhaps is more democratic, I guess, but in terms of the character, it's much more intimate for Rhaenyra, which I think
Right.
shows that these people around her really believe in her. And it's also one of the Cargill twins, one of the Eric twins, who brings Viserys' crown from King's Landing, from the Red Keep, to Dragonstone, to essentially give her and crown her. And so all these various lords and knights wear fealty, except for Rhaenys. She's kind of still looks a bit hesitant. But so that scene was great. And then we see Corlys is back, which obviously is always a plus, and probably helped to bump this episode up even for me. He has this great scene where he's basically, talking to Rhaenyra. What are your war plans? What are you doing about what are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? And he basically pledges fealty, swears fealty, and calls her your grace and his queen, which was also a great scene. And then kind of the last big moment at the end with Aemond inadvertently killing Lucerys on the way back from Storm's End, while he's kind of razzing him a bit, was excellent. And I think you said at the time that it was it was a great way to set up his arc going forward.
Mm.
Like, what will this do to him?
Right.
Will he, clearly in the moment he's distraught, but will this kind of embolden him now in his ways? Will he reel it in a bit? Will he decide, well, look, after thinking about it for a bit, he's like, well, I didn't really like the kid anyway. He took my eye. Who knows, right? Or will he kind of reel it back in? We don't know. Well, I may or may not know, but clearly, non-book readers don't know. So, yeah, just overall, and just visually, that scene is incredible. Just seeing the size of Vhagar flying over Arax, seeing the silhouette of Vhagar parked, I guess, at Storm's End,
Yeah.
was all just incredible.
Yeah, and again, like I'm talking about a lot of sequences and stuff. But one of my favorite sequences of the season for sure. One of my favorite shots for sure is that scene. And I might have a picture of it here in the video, but it's where Vagar's kind of silhouette is over Arax in the sky there in the clouds. Yeah, just some really great stuff at the ending sequence here. Like I said, a bit of a slower paced episode, I think, to me, compared to episode 9. It kind of starts off with a bang, if you will, and then kind of slows down from there. A lot of kind of war gaming as well in this episode. I really like that kind of those scenes, and especially the dynamic between Daemon and Rhaenyra as well in this episode, and kind of the divide between them, and Daemon being this merciless, wants to go to war, and would very much kill Otto there in that scene. Of course, that was a great scene as well. I don't think you mentioned that one, but where Otto comes to Dragonstone, and Rhaenyra being a little bit more kind of calculated, right, and trying to figure out, trying to stop as much destruction as possible, and really not wanting to go to war until probably, of course, the very end of the episode when she hears Lucerys dies. So yeah, like you said, I agree with pretty much all you said there. Corlys, it was good to have him back as well, and a good finale. I liked where this one ended. I think it's a really great spot that we can kind of come back in season 2, and kind of see the start of this dance, if you will. So yeah, really like this one. Okay, so just let's go over a bit of a recap then, of both of our lists. So my list is the following. So number 10 was episode 7, Driftmark. Number 9 is episode 6, The Princess and the Queen. Number 8 was episode 1, Heirs of the Dragon. Number 7, We Light the Way, episode 5. Number 6 was episode 9, The Green Council. Number 5 was episode 10, The Black Queen. Number 4 was episode 2, The Rogue Prince. Number 3 was episode 3, Second of His Name. Number 2, episode 8, The Lord of the Tides. And my number 1 favorite was episode 4, King of the Narrow Sea. Do you want to recap yours?
Yeah, so I had 6. Number 10, I had episode 6. Number 9, I had episode 1. Number 8, I had episode 4. Number 7, I had episode 2. Number 6, I had episode 9. And number 5, I had episode 5. Number 4, I had episode 7. Number 3, I had episode 3. Number 2, I had episode 10. And number 1, I had episode 8.
Right. Okay. All right, so that'll just about do it then for our episodes ranking here of season 1. Now we have got the news that, of course, season 2 will be coming in 2023, so we'll have to wait a little bit. But yeah, hopefully we'll be back to talk about that one. But this will probably be it for our kind of content on season 1. But anyways, thanks, Greg, for coming along for the journey here and this video as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was a good time.
Yep. All right. So thank you guys so much for watching this one, and we'll see you then in our next video.